The rain pounded against the glass of the towering skyscraper, a relentless drumbeat that matched the frantic pulse racing through Olivia Bennett's veins. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk, clutching a soggy paper bag filled with sandwiches and water bottles. Her dark hair plastered to her face. Her thin coat did little to shield her from the biting wind, but she didn't care. Across the street, under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, a small group of people huddled, tattered blankets draped over their shoulders, eyes hollow but hopeful. They were waiting for her. They always were. Olivia's breath hitched as she stepped off the curb, the cold seeping into her bones, but a flicker of warmth bloomed in her chest. This was her ritual, her quiet rebellion against a world that had long stopped looking at the forgotten. In Fern Mary, high above, in a sleek office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, Ethan Caldwell watched her. His sharp gray eyes narrowed as he leaned against his polished mahogany desk, a tumbler of whiskey dangling from his hand. The CEO of Caldwell Industries was a man of precision, every move calculated, every decision weighed against profit and power. He didn't have time for sentimentality, and he certainly didn't waste energy on the personal lives of his employees. Yet here he was, night after night, staring down at this peculiar woman who defied every rule he lived by. Olivia Bennett. Beverly, 3 months into her job as a junior assistant in the finance department, was an enigma. She wasn't climbing the corporate ladder or kissing up to the right people. Instead, she was out there, kneeling on the filthy sidewalk, handing out food like it was her damn mission. Ethan's jaw tightened, irritation prickling under his skin. "What the hell does she get out of this?" he muttered, his voice low and rough. He took a sip of the whiskey, the burn doing little to quiet the questions gnawing at him. Down below, Olivia laughed softly as an older man with a scruffy beard, Henry. She'd learned his name weeks ago, cracked a joke about the weather. "You're gonna catch pneumonia out here. Leave it at where one where do," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. She grinned, brushing a wet strand of hair from her eyes. "Worth it if you get a sandwich out of it." The group chuckled, their tired faces softening. And Olivia felt that familiar glow spread through her. It wasn't much, bread, water, wanting in a few granola bars, but it was something. She didn't have the money to fix their lives, but she could give them this. As she handed out the last of the food, her fingers brushed Henry's calloused hand, and he gave her a nod of gratitude that made her throat tighten. She stood, her legs stiff from crouching, and waved goodnight, oblivious to the piercing gaze tracking her every move from 30 floors up. Ethan turned away from the window, running a hand through his dark hair. He didn't get it. She didn't get paid enough to throw her money away like that. She couldn't. He'd seen her file. Single, no family in the city, a modest apartment in a sketchy neighborhood. She should have been saving every penny, not spending it on strangers who'd never pay her back. His mind churned, restless. He'd built his empire on logic. People didn't do things unless there was something in it for them. Recognition, leverage, a favor down the line. But Olivia, she didn't even seem to notice the world spinning around her. It pissed him off. How little sense she made. And yet, he couldn't stop watching. The next day at Caldwell Industries was a blur of numbers and deadlines for Olivia. She sat at her cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of reports, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her hazel eyes squinted at the screen, a faint crease forming between her brows as she wrestled with a spreadsheet that refused to balance. She didn't mind the grind. It kept her mind busy, kept her from thinking too hard about the bills piling up or the ache in her chest when she passed the homeless camp every night. She was good at her job, quiet but efficient, and she liked it that way. No spotlight, no fuss. Just the work. She was so lost in her task that she didn't notice the shadow falling over her desk until a deep voice cut through the hum of the office. "Bennett, there weren't any worry, teeny, keen." Olivia's head snapped up, her heart lurching into her throat. Ethan Caldwell stood there, all 6'2" of him, his tailored suit hugging his broad shoulders, his expression unreadable. She swallowed hard, her hands freezing mid-type. "Mr. Admiral Caldwell, during she stammered, pushing her chair back slightly. Is something wrong?" He crossed his arms, his gaze pinning her in place like a specimen under a microscope. "How long you been here?" he asked, his tone clipped. She blinked, caught off guard. 3 months. "So, sorry," he nodded, slow and deliberate. The frequenirasurium denturima. Like he was piecing something together. You like it? Her mouth opened, then closed. It was a simple question, but coming from him, the man who owned the building, the company, the air she breathed in this place, it felt loaded. Yes, one detention, she said finally, her voice steadying. It's tough, but I'm learning. He studied her for a beat longer, then gave a curt nod. Good. Keep it up. And just like that, he was gone, leaving her staring after him, her pulse still hammering. That evening, as the sky darkened and the office emptied out, Olivia grabbed her coat and headed to the corner store. The cashier gave her a knowing smile as she paid for her usual haul: bread, juice, and one dairy, a few protein bars. She stepped outside, the weight of the bags tugging at her arms, and crossed the street to the familiar spot. Henry and the others were there, their faces lighting up as she approached. You're a saint, Demawarm. Laria Lirn, a woman named Clara said, her voice raspy but warm. Olivia shook her head, kneeling to pass out the food. Just a girl with a paycheck. They laughed, and she felt that glow again. Steady and sure, Ethan watched from his car this time. Parked discreetly across the street, he'd meant to drive home. But something had pulled him here instead. He saw her smile, saw the way she listened to their stories, saw the ease in her movements despite the exhaustion etched into her posture. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel, a muscle ticking in his jaw. She was reckless, throwing away her money like that. But there was something else, something in the way she looked at them. Like she actually cared. It didn't fit. It didn't compute. And for the first time in years, Ethan Caldwell felt a crack in the armor he'd spent a lifetime building. Days turned into weeks, and Olivia's routine held steady. Nickwork, store, sidewalk, repeat. Tertiary. She didn't notice Ethan watching. Didn't know how his curiosity was morphing into something sharper, something he couldn't name. At the office, she buried herself in spreadsheets, her focus unwavering even as her bank account dwindled. She didn't complain, never had. But Ethan noticed. He noticed everything now. The way she chewed her lip when she was stressed. The quiet way she helped a struggling coworker. The faint shadows under her eyes. He told himself it was just observation, just data, but deep down, he knew it was more. One Friday, everything shifted. It was payday, and Olivia's phone buzzed with a deposit notification. Relief flooded her. Rent, bills, a little breathing room. But as she left work, her mind drifted to Henry's threadbare jacket, Clara's thin blanket, the young guy, Jake, who kept saying he'd get a job if he just had the right shoes. Before she could stop herself, she veered into a discount store. She bought a coat for Henry, a blanket for Clara, shoes for Jake, and enough food for a proper meal. By the time she walked out, her wallet was empty, but her heart was full. The group's reaction was worth it. Henry's eyes watered as he clutched the coat. Lever source, Fontainson. This is too much, he choked out. Clara hugged the blanket like it was gold. Jake stared at the sneakers, muttering, this'll change everything. Olivia beamed, the cold night air forgotten. You'd do it for me, she said simply. They ate together, laughter ringing out louder than usual. And Olivia felt alive. Then reality hit. She checked her phone, no money for the bus. She sighed, pulling her coat tighter, and started walking. The streets grew quieter, the wind sharper, her feet aching in her worn-out flats. 30 minutes in, she was shivering, her breath puffing in the air, when a sleek black car rolled up beside her. The window slid down, and Ethan Caldwell's face appeared. One eyebrow arched. How far are you planning to walk? He asked, his voice dry. Olivia froze, embarrassment flooding her. Home, she mumbled. He glanced at the empty road ahead. That's miles, a Sunten man, the Saint-Suri Demersimarn. Get in and... She hesitated, her pride warring with her exhaustion. But the warmth of the car beckoned. She climbed in, sinking into the leather seat with a quiet sigh. Ethan drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel. Then he glanced at her. Why are you walking? Olivia shrugged, avoiding his eyes. Spent all my money. His grip tightened. You got paid today, she nodded. And it's gone. Another nod. On what? She hesitated, then met his gaze. Helping them? The car went quiet, the hum of the engine filling the space. Ethan stared at her. disbelief flickering in his eyes. You spent your whole paycheck on strangers. She gave a small, awkward laugh. Sounds dumb when you say it like that. He blinked. It is dumb. She crossed her arms, looking out the window. Not to me. He didn't respond, but she could feel him thinking. Processing. After a moment, he asked, Rent to here. Where? She smiled faintly. I'll figure it out. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. Unbelievable. When they reached her building, she turned to him, her voice soft. Thanks for the ride, Mr. Caldwell. He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. If you keep this up, let me know. I'll cover your ride home. She laughed, shaking her head. I'll manage Huaring. She stepped out, but before she disappeared inside, she added, Good night. And thanks for caring. Ethan sat there, stunned, caring. He didn't care. Did he? He frowned, watching her go. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what to think. Monday morning, Ethan couldn't focus. Reports blurred on his desk. His mind stuck on Friday night, Olivia walking alone. Her quiet confession, that damn thanks for caring. It gnawed at him. A splinter he couldn't pull out. She was reckless, irrational, and yet intriguing. He hated it. He needed to understand her, to crack the code of why she did what she did. By noon, he'd had enough. He picked up his phone. Get Olivia Bennett to my office. Now Olivia was mid-sentence in an email when the summons came. Her stomach flipped. What did he want? She smoothed her blouse, her foreign Durman, grabbed her notepad, and headed to the 30 Pitson, her 35th floor. The assistant waved her in, and she stepped into Ethan's office. Her nerves buzzing. He was behind his desk, his expression cool but intense. Close the door, he said. She did, her fingers trembling slightly. You wanted to see me. He leaned forward, hands clasped. I want to understand something. She frowned. Okay. What? His eyes locked on hers. Why do you spend your money on people who'll never pay you back? Her breath caught. So that's what this was. You really want to know? She asked, crossing her arms. I do. She took a moment, then spoke, her voice steady. I do it because I see them every day, and no one else does. And because, she paused, her chest tightening. If I were them, I'd want someone to help me. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her. Then he leaned back, exhaling. You don't owe them anything. She shrugged. You don't need to owe someone to do what's right. Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Finally, he said, You're unbelievable. She smiled faintly. I get that a lot. He ran a hand over his face, like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Go back to work. She nodded. But as she reached the door, he added, If you need money, tell me, I'll cover your ride. She turned, smirking. I can handle it. He smirked back. We'll see. The days rolled on, and Ethan couldn't shake her. He watched her at work, watched her with the homeless, watched the way she moved through the world like it hadn't beaten her down yet. It frustrated him, how she defied his logic, but it also pulled at something deep inside him, something he'd buried under years of ambition. One rainy Friday, he saw her leave the building, umbrella in hand, and head to the store. Without thinking, he pulled his car up beside her as she stepped out. Get in, he said, his tone gruff. She blinked, rain dripping off her nose. Mr. Caldwell. He sighed. Don't make it weird. Just get in, she laughed. Climbing in, and he drove her to the sidewalk where the group waited. For the first time, Ethan didn't just watch, he saw Henry's gratitude, Clara's quiet tears, Jake's shy smile, and he saw Olivia, her face glowing despite the rain, her hands steady as she handed out food. When they were done, she turned to him. What did you think? He paused, searching for words. It's different up close. She grinned. Feels good, doesn't it? He raised an eyebrow. Don't push it. She laughed, and something in his chest shifted. Just a little. After that, things changed. Ethan started calling her into meetings, testing her, pushing her. She rose to every challenge, her quiet competence shining through. One night, he emailed her about a report. She met him in his office, nerves jangling, and he handed her the draft. Better than I expected. See, Wes, say her, he said. She blinked. Thanks. He smirked. You're welcome. The next day, she nailed a presentation to the board, and Ethan felt a flicker of pride he hadn't expected. She was good, damn good, and he wanted her to see it. Then came the crisis. An audit flagged discrepancies in her reports, and she was suspended. Olivia's world tilted, anger, fear, and shame crashing over her. Ethan found her outside, box in hand, her eyes blazing. They think I manipulated data. She spat, his jaw clenched. That's bullshit. I'll fix it. She shook her head. You can't, he cut her off. Watch me. 2 days later, he called her back. The finance manager admitted a mix-up, and Ethan demanded an apology. She was reinstated, and when she walked out of his office, she felt lighter and tethered to him in a way she couldn't ignore. Her nasu wanted him. Friday night, he texted her. Dinner, turn to dinner. I turn 8 p.m. No excuses. She went it definitely she went, her heart pounding. At the restaurant, he was different, relaxed, almost human. They talked, laughed. And when he took her hand, he said, we'll get through this. She believed him. And when he kissed her outside, sudden and fierce, she didn't pull away. It was reckless. It was wrong. And it was everything she'd been running from. But she didn't want to run anymore. Their relationship deepened. A secret they kept until a photo leaked, Ethan and Olivia. Leaving a restaurant, too close to deny, gossip erupted. But Ethan didn't flinch. We move forward, he told her. She nodded, scared but sure. Months later, at a candlelit dinner, he knelt, ring in hand. You've made me better, Olivia would see. Marry me. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, yes, Simon. Their wedding was a blur of joy. Vows sealed with a kiss that promised forever. From a rainy sidewalk to a lifetime together. They'd found each other, and that was enough. The weeks following the wedding were a whirlwind for Olivia Bennett, now Olivia Caldwell. She stood in the penthouse she now shared with Ethan, staring out at the city skyline that glittered like a sea of stars. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of the wedding band on her left hand, a quiet reminder of how fast everything had changed. Just months ago, she'd been a nobody in the grand machine of Caldwell Industries, scraping by on a junior assistant salary, her biggest worry whether she could afford an extra loaf of bread for Henry and the others. Now, 1, she was married to the man who owned it all. The thought made her stomach twist, a mix of awe and unease she couldn't shake. She wasn't sure she'd ever get used to it, the luxury, the attention, the weight of his name now tied to hers. Ethan stepped up behind her, his presence a steady warmth against her back. He slid an arm around her waist, his breath brushing her ear. You're quiet tonight, he murmured, his voice low and smooth. Olivia leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. Just thinking, she said softly, about how crazy this all is. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through her. Crazy good or crazy bad? She turned in his arms, meeting his gray eyes, eyes that could cut through steel but softened when they landed on her. Both are serentum, she admitted, a small smile tugging at her lips. I mean, we're through. Look at us. You, and I'm just, he cut her off, his hand cupping her face. Don't say just. You're not just anything. Her heart stuttered at the nickname, at the intensity in his gaze. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, and he kissed her forehead, lingering there like he could anchor her to this new reality. At the office, things were trickier. Olivia insisted on keeping her job. She wasn't about to become some trophy wife lounging in his penthouse all day. Ethan had smirked when she told him, a flicker of pride in his expression, but he'd agreed, fine. But don't expect me to go easy on you, he'd said, but that took it to him. And she'd rolled her eyes. Once. Knowing he meant it, she walked into Caldwell Industries every morning with her head high, determined to prove she belonged there on her own terms. But the whispers followed her anyway. Colleagues who'd once ignored her now watched her every move, their eyes darting between her and Ethan whenever he passed by. Some smiled too brightly. Others muttered behind her back. She slept her way up. Must be nice to have the boss in your pocket. Olivia heard it all, and each word stung like a paper cut. Small but sharp, she clenched her jaw and kept working, her fingers digging into her palms as she fought to stay above it. Ethan noticed. Of course. He always did. One afternoon, he found her in the break room, staring into her coffee like it held all the answers. You okay? He asked, leaning against the counter. His tie loosened just enough to hint at the man beneath the suit. She sighed, setting the mug down. They think I'm here because of you. His jaw tightened, a flash of anger in his eyes. They're wrong. She gave a bitter laugh. Doesn't matter. Todos son marketeering. They'll always see me as your wife first. Not me. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Then make them see you. You're better than half the people here. Prove it. She looked up at him, his words igniting something fierce in her chest. He was right. She'd never backed down from a challenge before. Why start now? That resolve carried her through the next few weeks. Olivia threw herself into her work, taking on bigger projects, speaking up in meetings, her voice steady even when her nerves screamed. Slowly, the whispers faded, not completely, but enough that she could breathe again. People started coming to her for help, not because of Ethan, but because she knew her stuff. One day, a senior analyst stopped by her desk, a sheepish grin on his face. Dean, Liv, can you take a look at this? You're better with numbers than I am. She blinked, surprised, then smiled. Sure. As he walked away, she felt a quiet triumph settle in her bones. She was carving her own space here, inch by inch, outside of work. Life with Ethan was a different kind of adjustment. He was still the same man she'd fallen for, sharp-witted, intense, a little rough around the edges. But there was a softness now, a side of him she hadn't seen before. One night, she came home to find him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting to cook dinner. The sight of him frowning at a smoking pan, muttering curses under his breath, made her burst out laughing. "That's what we yitzherd. What are you doing?" she asked, leaning against the doorway. He glanced up, a rare flush creeping up his neck. "Trying to impress you, failing miserably." She walked over, peering into the pan at the charred remains of what might have been chicken. "You're a billionaire? We're into Fernham, the Rikamerkin. Ethan, order takeout," he smirked, pulling her close. "Where's the fun in that?" She shook her head, but the warmth of his arms around her melted away the day's stress. These moments, quiet, messy, real, were what grounded her. But not everything was perfect. Olivia still went to the sidewalk every night, her bags of food a constant in her chaotic new life. Ethan didn't stop her. He'd even joined her a few times, standing awkwardly beside her as Henry teased him about his fancy shoes. "You sticking around?" Henry had asked once, eyeing him suspiciously. Ethan had shrugged, hands in his pockets. "A fun of him. For her, yeah, ma'am." Olivia's heart had swelled at that, but she couldn't ignore the growing tension in her chest. She was living two lives now, one with Ethan in his world of wealth and power, and one down here, where she felt most herself. Could they coexist forever? One evening, as she handed Clara a bottle of water, the older woman grabbed her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You're different lately. Clara said, her eyes searching. Olivia frowned. "Different how?" Clara smiled faintly. "Happier, Suri weren't pity." But farther away, the words hit Olivia like a punch. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Clara was right. She was happier. Ethan had given her that. But she was drifting from this. From them. Guilt gnawed at her as she walked away, the bag lighter in her hands but her heart heavier. That night, she sat on the penthouse balcony, the city sprawling below her. Ethan found her there, his footsteps quiet on the marble floor. "You're doing it again," he said, sitting beside her, thinking too much. She didn't look at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, am I losing myself?" Ethan was serum. He stilled, the question hanging between them. Then he took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. No, Tony. You're just figuring out how to be both." She turned to him, her eyes glistening. "What if I can't?" He squeezed her hand, his gaze steady. "You will. I'll make sure of it." The next day, Ethan surprised her. He showed up at the sidewalk with her, but this time, he carried his own bag, sandwiches. "Water waiter, with her." Even a few blankets. Olivia stared, her mouth falling open. What's this? She asked. He shrugged, a hint of a smirk on his lips. Figured I'd pitch in. Henry cackled, clapping him on the back. Well, damn. Suit's got a heart after all. Ethan rolled his eyes, but Olivia saw the faintest flush on his cheeks. As they handed out the supplies together, she felt the tension in her chest ease. Maybe she didn't have to choose. Maybe Ethan was right. She could be both. Months later, they found a rhythm. Olivia excelled at work, her confidence growing with every project. Ethan pushed her, challenged her. He went where yours was the one on. But he also stood by her, a quiet pillar she hadn't known she needed. And every night, they went to the sidewalk together, a team in more ways than one. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the city, Olivia looked at Ethan, his sleeves rolled up, his hair mussed, a sandwich in his hand, and felt a love so deep it scared her. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow. Wait, what tea is, sir? Siri one. She smiled, stepping closer. You're not so bad. Kinoishiwum. Caldwell, he smirked, pulling her into his arms. You're not so bad yourself. In that moment, under the street lamp's glow, with Henry's laughter in the background and the city humming around them, Olivia knew she'd found her place, not just with Ethan, but within herself. The rain had stopped long ago, but the warmth they'd built together would last forever. The crisp autumn air swept through the city, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant hum of traffic. Olivia Caldwell stood on the penthouse balcony, a steaming mug of coffee cradled in her hands, her hazel eyes tracing the horizon. It had been 6 months since the wedding, 6 months since she'd said I do to Ethan, and stepped fully into a life she'd never imagined. The ring on her finger still felt foreign sometimes, a glinting symbol of a promise that tied her to a man who'd once been untouchable. She took a sip of the coffee, the bitterness grounding her as her mind wandered. She was happy, happier than she'd ever been, but there was a restlessness stirring beneath it all. A quiet question she couldn't quite voice. What now? Inside, Ethan was sprawled on the couch, a tablet in hand, scrolling through reports. It's just on. He'd taken to working from home more often, a subtle shift Olivia hadn't expected from a man who'd once lived for the office. She watched him through the glass doors, his dark hair falling over his forehead, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked softer here, less like the cold, calculating CEO, and more like the man who'd burned chicken trying to impress her. A smile tugged at her lips, but it faded as her thoughts drifted back to the sidewalk, to Henry and Clara and Jake. They were still part of her life, hers and Ethan's now. But something felt different. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it gnawed at her, a splinter of doubt she couldn't ignore. Ethan glanced up, catching her staring. He set the tablet aside and stood, stretching his arms over his head. You're brooding again, he said, stepping onto the balcony. His voice was teasing, but his gray eyes held a flicker of concern. Olivia shrugged, turning back to the city. Just thinking. He leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. About. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. Everything, I could use them to warn him on this. She nodded toward the streets below, where the homeless camp sat tucked beneath the overpass. Ethan followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. You're worried, Owentum. He said, not a question. She sighed, her breath clouding in the cool air. I don't know. It feels different now. Like I'm not doing enough. He didn't respond right away, just watched her, his silence a steady weight. Finally, he said, you're doing more than most people ever will. Leave her me or Waterman. She shook her head, frustration bubbling up. It's not about that. It's about them. They're still out there. We turn in a Ethan, we hand out food, blankets, whatever, but it doesn't fix anything. Not really. Her voice cracked, and she hated it. Hated how small she felt admitting it. Ethan's hand found hers, his grip firm. You can't fix everything, he said quietly, but you're giving them something. That's not nothing. She looked at him, his words sinking in, but the restlessness didn't fade. Maybe, she murmured, but I want to do more. That night, they went to the sidewalk together, bags in hand. Henry greeted them with his usual grin, his new coat zipped up against the chill. Look at you two. Regular do-gooders now, he said, winking at Ethan. Ethan smirked, handing him a sandwich. Don't get used to it. Old man, Clara laughed, her raspy voice cutting through the air. And Jake gave Olivia a shy nod as he took a pair of gloves she'd added to the haul. She smiled, the familiar warmth spreading through her. But it was tinged with something else, something heavier. As they handed out the last of the supplies, Olivia lingered, watching the group settle in for the night. Ethan stood beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. You're still thinking, he said. She nodded, her eyes fixed on Clara's thin frame, wrapped in the blanket. Yeah, moi, maman. Ma foot. Back at the penthouse, Olivia couldn't sleep. She slipped out of bed, leaving Ethan's steady breathing behind, and padded to the living room. She grabbed her laptop and started researching. Shelters, outreach programs, anything that might make a real difference. Hours passed, the screen's glow casting shadows across her face, her mind racing with ideas. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the windows, she had a plan. It was rough, ambitious, maybe even crazy, but it felt right. She closed the laptop, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement, and went back to bed. Curling up against Ethan's warmth, he stirred, pulling her closer without waking, and she let herself drift off, the seed of something new taking root. The next morning, she waited until they were at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, before she brought it up. I want to start something, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. Ethan raised an eyebrow, setting his mug down. Start what? She took a deep breath. A program, something to help them, really help them. Not just food and blankets, but a way out. Job training, housing support. Counseling. He leaned back, studying her, his expression unreadable. That's a big swing. Leave it way tomorrow. She nodded, her hands tightening around her mug. I know, but I can't keep doing the same thing and pretending it's enough. I've got the skills, finance, organization, and you've got the resources. We could make it work. Her voice rose, urgency creeping in. I need to do this. Ethan, he didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched her, his gray eyes searching hers. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You're serious about this? It wasn't a question. Nano in a refutation, buena suranon. But she nodded anyway, dead serious. A slow smile spread across his face, not the smirk she was used to, but something warmer, prouder. Okay, he said simply. Let's do it. Olivia blinked, caught off guard. Just like that, he shrugged. You think I'd say no to you? She laughed, relief flooding her, and reached across the table to grab his hand. You're insane. He squeezed her fingers, his smile widening. Takes one to know one. The next few weeks were a blur of planning. Olivia dove in headfirst, drafting proposals, researching funding, meeting with local nonprofits. Ethan was her shadow, leveraging his connections, cutting through red tape with a single phone call. His presence a steady anchor as she navigated uncharted waters. They worked late into the nights. In Mayaward Mary, papers strewn across the penthouse floor, coffee cups piling up. Olivia's eyes burned with exhaustion, but she felt alive. Electric with purpose, Ethan watched her, marveling at the fire in her, how she could be so soft and so fierce at the same time. You're relentless, he said one night, sprawled on the couch as she paced, scribbling notes. She grinned. Not looking up? You married me. Your fault. He laughed, pulling her down beside him. And for a moment, the world shrank to just them, tangled together in the chaos of their shared dream. The program, now Streetlight Hope, launched 3 months later. Olivia stood in a small community center, her heart hammering as she cut the ribbon. Ethan at her side, Henry, Clara, and Jake were there, wide-eyed and grinning. The first enrollees in a pilot that offered job training, mental health support, and transitional housing. Henry hugged her, his voice rough with emotion. You're a damn miracle. She shook her head, tears prickling her eyes. Just trying to keep up with you. Ethan's hand found hers, his grip tight, and she felt his pride radiating through her. The months that followed were grueling but rewarding. Olivia split her time between the office and Streetlight, her days a marathon of meetings and spreadsheets, her nights filled with stories of progress. Jake landing a job at a warehouse, Clara moving into a tiny apartment, Henry starting therapy. Ethan was there through it all, his support unwavering. Even when she stumbled home exhausted, collapsing into his arms, worth it. He'd ask, brushing hair from her face. Every second, some, she'd murmur, and he'd kiss her, slow and deep, like he was sealing the words into her soul. One night, a year after the launch, was 1 in 9 to 1. They stood on the sidewalk where it all began. The camp was smaller now, fewer faces under the street lamp, and Olivia felt a quiet ache for those still there, but also a fierce hope for what they'd built. Ethan wrapped an arm around her, his voice low. You did it. Live a. She leaned into him, her eyes shining. We did it, he smiled, pulling her closer. And as the city buzzed around them, she knew this was just the beginning of their work. Their loved ones for him, their life together. The restlessness was gone, replaced by a certainty that with Ethan by her side, she could take on anything. The winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the city as Olivia Caldwell stepped out of the community center, her breath puffing in the frigid air. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, the wool scratching against her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind was still buzzing from the meeting she'd just left. A progress report on Streetlight Hope. The numbers were good. 30 people enrolled, 15 in stable jobs, 10 in permanent housing. Jake was thriving at the warehouse, even training new hires now. His shy grin, a far cry from the hollow-eyed kid she'd met 2 years ago. Clara had invited her over last week to see her apartment, a cramped but cozy space filled with secondhand furniture and pride. Henry was slower to come around, but he'd started talking about getting off the streets, his gruff voice softening when he mentioned the counselor Olivia had paired him with. She smiled to herself, a quiet glow of satisfaction warming her despite the cold. It was working, really working. But beneath the glow, there was a shadow. Olivia felt it more these days, a nagging pull she couldn't shake. Siri, Streetlight was her baby. Her heart poured into every detail, but it was also a beast that demanded more. More time, more energy, more of her. She'd cut back her hours at Caldwell Industries to focus on it, a decision Ethan had supported without hesitation. But it meant she was stretched thin, her days a tightrope walk between the program and her life with him. She loved it, loved him, loved them, but sometimes, late at night when the world was quiet, she wondered if she was losing pieces of herself in the process. Ethan was waiting for her at home, the penthouse light spilling gold onto the balcony as she stepped inside. He looked up from the kitchen island, a glass of red wine in hand, his dark hair tousled from running his fingers through it, a habit she'd come to adore. How'd it go? He asked, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of her thoughts. She dropped her bag by the door, kicking off her boots as she crossed the room. Good morning. Nivarti, Ashikam, she said, sliding onto a stool beside him. Better than good. Actually, Jake's killing it. Clara's talking about getting a cat. And Henry, God, Ethan, he's thinking about an apartment. Her eyes lit up, her hands gesturing as she spoke. And Ethan watched her, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're a force. We on. Leave a word, he said, handing her a glass of wine. She took it, her fingers brushing his, and felt a flicker of warmth chase away the chill. We're a force. For some she corrected, holding his gaze. He smirked, but there was something softer in it, something that made her heart skip. They ate dinner together, takeout, because neither of them had the energy to cook, and the conversation flowed easy, like it always did. But as they cleared the plates, Ethan's hand lingered on hers, his thumb tracing circles over her knuckles. You're quiet again, he said, his tone gentle but probing. Olivia sighed, leaning against the counter. Just tired, I think. He raised an eyebrow, not buying it. Simon. She looked at him, his gray eyes steady, and felt the words spill out before she could stop them. I'm scared I'm not enough. For this, for them, yes, sir, and went. For us, her voice trembled, and she hated how vulnerable it sounded. But Ethan didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his hands framing her face. You're more than enough, he said, his voice low and fierce. You're everything. She swallowed hard, tears prickling her eyes, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against the storm inside her. The next day, Olivia threw herself back into Streetlight, but Ethan's words stuck with her, a lifeline she clung to when doubt crept in. She met with a new batch of enrollees, 5 people this time. their faces a mix of wariness and hope. One of them, a woman named Tara, reminded her of Clara, sharp-tongued but fragile, her hands trembling as she took a cup of coffee. "You really think this'll work?" Tara asked, her voice edged with skepticism. Olivia smiled, leaning forward. "I know it will." "'Cause you're here," Tara blinked, then nodded, a flicker of trust breaking through her guarded exterior. Olivia felt that glow again, the one that kept her going. But it was tempered now. Steadier, she wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. She was building it, brick by brick. Ethan started showing up at the community center more often, not just to support her, but to pitch in. He'd roll up his sleeves, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights, and help with whatever needed doing, sorting donations, setting up chairs, even talking to the enrollees. Henry took to calling him Suit full-time, a nickname Ethan bore with a grudging smirk. One afternoon, as they unpacked a shipment of winter coats, Tara sidled up to Olivia, jerking her chin toward Ethan. "He's not what I expected," she said. Olivia glanced at him, laughing at something Henry said, his hands dusty from cardboard, and felt a rush of love so strong it nearly knocked her over. "He's full of surprises," she replied, and Tara snorted. But there was a smile in it. The holidays came fast, and with them, a chance to breathe. Olivia and Ethan hosted a small party at the penthouse for the streetlight crew. Henry, Clara, Jake, Tara, and a few others who'd become family in their own way. The room buzzed with laughter, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon. Jake brought a cheap string of lights he'd found at a thrift store, and Clara insisted on hanging them over the balcony railing, her hands shaky but determined. Henry cornered Ethan by the bar, regaling him with a story about his old trucking days. And Ethan listened, his head tilted, a rare grin on his face. Olivia watched it all from the kitchen, her heart full to bursting. This was what she'd wanted, not just to help, but to build something real, something lasting. But later, as the guests trickled out, Ethan found her on the balcony, the city sparkling below. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, his arms following, and she leaned back into him. The cold forgotten, Sir Nidimon. "Good night, that's a good night. Assistant, Desiwan," he asked, his breath warm against her ear. She nodded, her voice soft. "The best." He turned her to face him, his hands resting on her hips. "You're happy," he said. Not a question, but a statement, like he could see it radiating from her. She smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "Because of you. Because of this." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she felt the world steady beneath her feet. But life wasn't done testing them. A week into the new year, a call came from the community center. Funding cuts threatened to slash Streetlight's budget in half. Olivia's stomach dropped as she hung up, her hands shaking. She found Ethan in his office, pacing as he barked orders into his phone, already mobilizing his network to fill the gap. "We'll fix it," he told her when he hung up, his jaw set. "I'm not letting this fall apart." She nodded, but the fear lingered, a cold weight in her chest. They spent days scrambling, meetings with donors, late-night strategy sessions, Olivia's voice hoarse from pitching to anyone who'd listen. Ethan threw his weight behind it, his presence a bulldozer clearing obstacles. But it wasn't enough. They needed a miracle. It came in the form of an old friend of Ethan's, a tech mogul who'd owed him a favor. One phone call, and the funding was secured, not just restored, but doubled. Olivia collapsed onto the couch when Ethan told her, relief crashing over her like a wave. He sat beside her, pulling her into his lap. "Told you we'd fix it," he said, his voice smug but soft. She laughed, burying her face in his neck. "You're insufferable," he smirked, kissing her temple. "And you're stuck with me." Spring brought renewal. Streetlight grew, a second location opening across town. And Olivia found her stride again. She and Ethan were a team, unstoppable, unbreakable. One evening, as they walked the sidewalk together, bags in hand, Henry stopped them, his eyes bright. "Got a place," he said gruffly, holding up a key. "Move in next week." Olivia's breath caught, tears spilling over as she hugged him. Ethan clapped him on the shoulder, his voice rough. "Proud of you, old man. Wayne a funny sonar." Henry grinned, and Olivia felt the glow ignite. Brighter than ever, standing there, Ethan's arm around her, the city alive around them. Olivia knew this was her life now. Messy, harder, beautiful. She'd found her purpose, Unmada Doradas on Mas as in Worsion, her partner, Yuder Watcharin Wooden Kenpinterin, her place, Ni one, and with every step, she and Ethan wrote their story together. One of grit and grace, forever intertwined. The summer sun blazed over the city, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage as Olivia Caldwell stepped out of the new Streetlight Hope Center across town, sweat beaded on her forehead, her blouse clinging to her skin. But she didn't mind. The ribbon cutting had gone off without a hitch. Dozens of people gathered, cameras flashing, a small crowd cheering as she and Ethan officially opened the second location. Her chest swelled with pride, a fierce, aching thing that made her eyes sting. She'd poured everything into this, every late night, every argument with bureaucrats, every moment of doubt, and now it was real. 2 centers, twice the reach, twice the chance to change lives. She wiped her brow, a grin breaking across her face as she spotted Ethan across the lot, shaking hands with a local councilman, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder. He caught her eye and winked, and her heart did that stupid flip it always did. Even after all this time, inside, the center buzzed with activity, volunteers setting up tables, enrollees trickling in, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. Olivia moved through the chaos, her voice steady as she directed traffic, her hands quick to help where needed. Tara was there, her sharp edges softened by months of stability. Now a part-time staffer helping newbies settle in. You're a slave driver. Live one Westin Wainin, she teased, hauling a box of supplies past her. Olivia laughed, brushing hair from her eyes. You love it. Tara smirked, but there was gratitude in it, a quiet acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. Olivia felt it too, a thread connecting her to every person here, a web she'd woven with her own hands. Ethan found her later, leaning against a wall as she sipped water from a paper cup. You're in your element, he said, his voice low, a smile tugging at his lips. She glanced at him, her cheeks flushing under his gaze. So, are you? She shot back, nodding toward the councilman he'd charmed earlier. He shrugged, stepping closer. I'm just the money. We heute bin ich Turmauern. You're the heart. Her breath caught, his words sinking deep, and she reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. We're both Portasanoni, Rusimon, she said softly, and he squeezed her hand, his eyes saying what his voice didn't need to. But the high didn't last. A week later, trouble hit. A pipe burst in the new center's basement, flooding the storage room and ruining half their supplies. Coats, blankets, food, Western, all soaked and unsalvageable. Olivia stood ankle-deep in murky water, her boots squelching, her stomach churning as she surveyed the damage. Shit, she muttered, running a hand through her hair. The repair costs would eat into their budget, and replacing the lost goods would stretch them even thinner. She felt the weight of it crash down, her shoulders sagging as panic clawed at her throat. This was her responsibility, her dream, and it was slipping through her fingers. Ethan arrived within the hour, his face grim as he waded in beside her. How bad? He asked, his voice cutting through the hum of volunteers mopping up. She gestured helplessly at the mess. Brad, we're out thousands in a room, the ones, and we can't help anyone until it's fixed. Her voice cracked, frustration and fear spilling over. He didn't flinch, just nodded, his jaw tight. I'll handle the repairs. You focus on the people. She shook her head, her hands balling into fists. Ethan, we can't keep leaning on you. He cut her off, his hand on her arm, firm but gentle. We're a team. Livery you. Let me do this. She stared at him, torn between pride and gratitude, then nodded, the fight draining out of her. Okay, she whispered, and he pulled her into a quick, fierce hug, the dampness of his shirt pressing against her cheek. They rallied. Ethan called in favors, getting the pipes fixed in record time, while Olivia scrambled to replace the supplies, begging donors, raiding discount stores, her voice hoarse from phone calls. The center reopened in 10 days. A minor miracle, but Olivia couldn't shake the unease. She sat in the penthouse that night, staring at the ceiling. Ethan asleep beside her. The flood had been a wake-up call. Street light was growing, but it was fragile, too dependent on their grit and his wallet. She needed a safety net, a way to make it sustainable. The thought kept her up, her mind spinning with half-formed plans until exhaustion finally claimed her. Fall brought a new challenge. A reporter from a local paper reached out, wanting to do a feature on Streetlight Hope. Olivia hesitated. Publicity could bring funding, but it also meant scrutiny, and she wasn't sure she was ready for the spotlight. Ethan pushed her gently, his voice calm over breakfast. You've got nothing to hide. Leave her with me or wash. Let them see what you've built. She bit her lip, doubt gnawing at her, but nodded. Fine, but if they twist it, I'm blaming you, he smirked, kissing her forehead. Deal. The interview was grueling, 2 hours of questions. The reporter's pen scratching as Olivia recounted the journey. The sidewalk, the first center, the flood, Mutranane warns. She kept Ethan's role minimal, wanting the focus on the program, not his money. But the reporter pressed. Your husband's a big name. How much of this is his doing? Olivia's jaw tightened, her voice sharp. He's my partner, not my puppet master. This is mine. The reporter raised an eyebrow but moved on, and Olivia exhaled, her hands trembling under the table. When the article dropped a week later, it was glowing. Olivia Caldwell's mission to lift the forgotten. But the subtext rankled her, hinting at Ethan's wealth as the real engine. She tossed the paper aside, frustration simmering, and Ethan found her pacing the living room. It's bullshit. Pershun, she snapped. He pulled her into his arms, his voice steady. They don't get it, but the people who matter do. She buried her face in his chest, letting his certainty calm her. Winter tested them again. A brutal cold snap hit, and the centers overflowed. Every bed taken, every blanket claimed. Olivia worked double shifts, her eyes gritty with fatigue, her hands raw from handing out supplies. Ethan was there too, his breath fogging as he hauled boxes in the snow, his usual polish traded for a parka and boots. One night, as they locked up the original center, a man approached, mid-30s, unshaven, his coat too thin for the weather. Heard you help people, he said, his voice rough. Olivia nodded, exhaustion fading under a surge of purpose. We do? Come in. She led him inside, Ethan grabbing a spare blanket, and they sat with him, Mark. His name was, listening as he spilled a story of lost jobs and bad luck. Which you want for him? By morning, he was enrolled, a spark of hope in his eyes, and Olivia felt that glow reignite, fierce and unyielding. Back home, she collapsed onto the couch, Ethan beside her, their hands entwined. We're doing it, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. He turned to her, his gray eyes soft. Yeah, we are. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, and felt the weight of the day lift. But a new thought crept in. Quiet but insistent, she wanted more. Not just for Streetlight, but for them. Winunaramadar. She glanced at him, his profile sharp against the dim light, and her heart thudded. Ethan. Termana utum, she said, her voice tentative. He looked at her, curious. What? She took a deep breath, the words trembling on her lips. What if we had a kid? His eyes widened, a rare crack in his composure, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he smiled, slow and real, pulling her close. Yeah, acho, he said, his voice rough. Let's do it. Spring bloomed, and with it, a new chapter. Irasuanamam serum. Olivia stood in the penthouse bathroom, a pregnancy test in hand, 2 pink lines staring back at her. Her breath hitched, joy and fear crashing together, and she ran to Ethan, finding him in the kitchen. We're having a baby, she blurted, and he froze, coffee mug halfway to his mouth. Then he laughed. A sound so pure it shook her, and swept her into his arms, spinning her until she was dizzy with it. Ya baby, he repeated, his voice awed, and she nodded, tears spilling over as they clung to each other. The months flew by. Streetlight thriving, their family growing. Olivia's belly swelled. Her energy split between the centers and the life inside her. Ethan's hand a constant on her back. One night, as they walked the sidewalk slower now, her steps careful, Henry stopped them, his grin wide. Heard you're making me an uncle, he said, and Olivia laughed. Shigging well. Hugging him, Ethan smirked, tossing him a sandwich. Keep it up. Old man! The city hummed around them, the glow of the street lamp casting their shadows long and sure. And Olivia knew this was it, her life, her love, her legacy, all wrapped up in the man beside her and the future they'd build together. The golden hues of late autumn painted the city in a warm glow, the leaves crunching underfoot as Olivia Caldwell waddled down the familiar sidewalk, her hand resting on her swollen belly. At 8 months pregnant, every step was a small victory, her body heavy but her spirit light. Ethan walked beside her, a bag of sandwiches slung over his shoulder, his free hand hovering near her elbow, ready to steady her if she faltered. The air was crisp, tinged with the promise of winter, but the warmth between them was a shield against the chill. They'd come to the sidewalk tonight not just to hand out food, but to say goodbye, not forever, but for a little while. The baby was due soon, and Olivia knew her days of late-night runs would pause as she stepped into motherhood. The thought thrilled her, terrified her, and filled her with a quiet certainty all at once. Henry was waiting, his grizzled face breaking into a wide grin as they approached. "Look at you, liever neder, sir," he said, his voice rough with affection. "Big as a house and still out here." She laughed, the sound bright and free, and rubbed her belly. "Not for much longer. This little one's taking over." Henry's eyes softened, and he reached out, hesitating before patting her shoulder. "You're going to be one hell of a mom," he said. "The rain is sort of one," and the words hit her hard, a lump rising in her throat. Clara shuffled over, her new scarf, a gift from Olivia, wrapped tight around her neck. "Better bring that kid by to meet us," she rasped, her smile crinkling her weathered face. Olivia nodded, tears prickling her eyes. "Promise?" Jake joined them, taller now, his warehouse job giving him a steady confidence. "Got something for you," he said, pulling a tiny pair of sneakers from his pocket. White, scuffed, but perfect. Olivia's breath caught, and she took them, her fingers trembling. "Jake?" he shrugged, ducking his head. "Figured the kid needs to start right." Ethan handed out the sandwiches, his movements easy. Practiced, but Olivia saw the way his eyes lingered on her, on the group, on this moment. He'd changed so much since that first night he'd watched her from his office window. Still sharp, still driven, but softer now, his edges smoothed by love and purpose. As the group ate, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves, Olivia felt a pang, not of sadness, but of completion. This was where it had started, where she'd found herself, where she'd found him. And now, Wakadawam, it was where they'd close one chapter to begin another. Back at the penthouse, the city sprawled below them, a tapestry of lights against the deepening dusk. Olivia stood on the balcony, the baby kicking gently inside her, a reminder of the life they'd created. Ethan joined her, his arms slipping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, his voice a low rumble she felt in her bones. She nodded, leaning into him. "More than okay. Just taking it all in." He turned her gently, his gray eyes searching hers, and she saw everything there. Pride, love, a future she'd never dared dream of. "You've done so much." "Livra son," he said, his hand resting on her belly. "This us." Streetlight sub into them. "It's all you." She shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "It's us. Always has been." A week later, the call of labor came swift and fierce. Olivia gripped Ethan's hand in the hospital room, her breath ragged, her body straining as she brought their daughter into the world. When the cries finally filled the air, high and strong, Olivia sobbed, relief and joy crashing over her. Ethan cut the cord, his hands steady but his eyes wet, and the nurse placed the tiny, squirming bundle in Olivia's arms. She looked down at her daughter, dark hair, a scrunched face, on perfect, and felt her heart split wide open. "Hey, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan leaned in, his forehead pressed to hers, his voice breaking. "She's beautiful. Like her mom." They named her Grace, a nod to the grace that had carried them here. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and tender moments. Grace's tiny hand wrapped around Ethan's finger, Olivia's soft humming as she rocked her to sleep. Sorry, Streetlight Hope hummed along without her for now, Tara and the team stepping up. But Olivia felt its pull even from the nursery. She'd be back, she knew, stronger, with Grace by her side. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, Ethan found her cradling Grace, her eyes distant. "Thinking about the sidewalk?" he asked, sitting beside her. She smiled, nodding, always humming them. He took Grace from her arms, the baby nestling against his chest, and pulled Olivia close. We'll take her there. Show her where it all started. Olivia's heart swelled, the image vivid, Grace in a stroller, Henry's gruff laugh, Clara's teasing, Jake's quiet pride. Months later, they did just that. Spring had returned, the air soft and green, and Olivia pushed Grace's stroller down the sidewalk. Ethan beside her, a bag of supplies in hand. The group was smaller now, Henry in his apartment, Clara settled, Jake thriving, but a few familiar faces remained. And new ones had taken their place. Henry met them, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Grace. Well, Olivia was, shamanon. Dar damn, she's a looker. Daracha mafarand into one, so he said, peering into the stroller. Olivia laughed, lifting Grace out, her tiny sneakers, Jake's gift, dangling as Henry took her, his hands gentle despite their roughness. Clara cooed. Jake grinned, and the newbies watched. Curious but warm, Olivia handed out food, Ethan at her side, and as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows, she felt a peace settle deep in her soul. That night, back home, Grace asleep in her crib, Olivia stood with Ethan on the balcony, the city alive below. She turned to him, her hand finding his, their fingers lacing together. We made it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He looked at her, his gray eyes steady, infinite. Yeah, we did. He pulled her close, his lips brushing hers, and the kiss was a promise of love, of struggle, of a life built from grit and grace. Below, the street lamp glowed, a beacon in the dark, and Olivia knew this was their forever. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. From a rainy night to a family of 3, they'd carved a legacy of hope. One sandwich, one fight, one heartbeat at a time. And as the stars blinked awake above, she rested her head on his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heart, and smiled. This was home. Hey everyone, son everyone. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to an incredible story that's going to tug at your heartstrings and keep you hooked till the very end. I'm so thrilled you're here to join Olivia and Ethan's journey, a tale of grit, something, love, and hope that proves the smallest acts can change everything. If you love a good story that hits you right in the feels, smash that like button to let me know. And hit subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter of these emotional adventures. Turn on notifications too. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's dive in. What did you think of this one? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's get this conversation started.